Lately, all over the news, it seems like there's constant reports about protests breaking out, even some riots breaking out over Islam. And it seems like there's a lot of confusion on social media about why people are starting to have such strong reactions to Islam coming to our countries, taking over different communities. And it just seems like there's a lot of misinformed people that I wanted to, try to put on a better path for understanding. So, what I did is I found this documentary that really just covers the rise of the Ayatollah. Now, it's a long documentary. I'm only going to play the last half of it, but the link is in the description if you want to see the full thing. Um, Throughout it, I'll pause and add some commentary. But before we start to watch it, it's so important that people are able to understand the history of our world. And it seems like most of the problems, as cliche as it is, or as it sounds, is the fact that people are really just doomed to repeat history over and over because they genuinely don't know. And I think this situation with the rise of Islam in our Western countries is really one of the most clear examples of this. Now, I want to make it very abundantly clear. Me doing this isn't because I just overtly support Israel and things like that. For a long time, I was the videographer for Bez Believe, who is, very proudly a Jewish individual. And him and I had many talks about my feelings of Netanyahu. And, it's not that I dislike Jewish people, obviously, if I'm going to be willing to work for one for as long as I did. But my feelings about Israel are complicated, and this is nothing to do with that. Regardless if Israel is committing war crimes or if they're justified in their actions, Islam itself is its own unique threat. In my opinion, it should be considered up there with the way people view people in the KKK or Nazis, and not in the woke where everybody's a Nazi or you just must be a white supremacist, but the genuine fear that those groups actually have been able to bring about because of the terror that they cause. Islam is as guilty as any other religion or ideology that has ever taken the world. And it's time for people to understand the truth of this. So I guess instead of just rambling and going on and on, let's check out the documentary.
The immediate lead up to the revolution can be seen from around 1977 onwards. Despite the huge revenues coming in from oil, Prime Minister Amir Abbas Hoveyda was confronted by the prospect of increasing inflation in the economy. His solution was to take it out on the Bazaris. At the same time, the Shah was being pressured by the new US President Jimmy Carter to mend his human rights record. American policymakers were likely concerned by the Shah's growing independence and his role in the raising of oil prices. Western newspapers and NGOs were quick to highlight Iran's poor human rights situation. Iran's geopolitical status was of the utmost importance to the Shah, who wanted to recapture the glory of past Persian empires. So under international pressure, he relented and allowed for political liberalization to take place. Clamoring amongst intellectual circles increased as the fear of Savak died down. Then, a fascinating chain of events took place that saw Iran stumble its way into a revolution.
It's absolutely incredible how history just repeats itself. They have a period of inflation, there's backlash against it, the US government is upset about oil prices, and all of these factors lead to this boiling tension that creates this atmosphere to start an Islamic revolution, which is exactly why so many of us in the West are terrified at the notion of these Islamists coming to us. We are in a very similar climate. We're in a very similar position to have this happen. And just wait till you hear what happens after this revolution begins.
Later that year, the influential writer Ali Shariati and Ayatollah Khomeini's son Mustafa both died in mysterious circumstances. Many in Iran put the blame on the Pahlavis. The death of his son put Khomeini back on the national stage as mourning ceremonies were held for Mustafa. In January 1978, an anonymous article was published in the pro-Pahlavi Italiat national newspaper, which denounced Khomeini as a foreign agent and went on to note that his ancestors had in fact moved back from India in the 19th century. The editorial.
How many more similarities do you think that we're going to come across? They deemed the leader a foreign agent. I mean, there's just so many parallels, and they're not one-to-one. They're not exactly, but it's just unprecedented to see how similar and how many individual nodes of reality connect in this.
The editorial provoked outrage. A few thousand seminary students in Qom took to the streets and persuaded local bazaars to close down. The demonstrations ended when security forces began to shoot protesters. Dozens of people were killed, shocking the nation. In accordance with Shia customs, memorial services were held 40 days later. So 6 weeks later, the students were commemorated in various cities. Demonstrations followed shortly afterwards. The largest of these was in Tabriz, which descended into a riot where institutions connected to the government or the West were targeted. Cinemas, bars, and police stations were set ablaze. The army was sent in to forcefully quell the chaos, killing several protesters. 40 days later, similar demonstrations were staged in various cities once again. This pattern repeated itself numerous times and was massively consequential. Whilst the ulama, including Khomeini from his exile in Iraq, spearheaded these protests, they were effective due to their traditional alliance with the Bazaris who contributed by going on strike. The Shah persisted with his political liberalization, relaxing censorship and promising democratic elections would be held the next year in 1979. Due to a lack of training,
That sounds very similar to Zelensky in Ukraine. We'll have elections. We just can't right now. We're in the midst of some chaos. Just hold out. Listen, trust me. Believe me, bro. Just believe me, bro. It's crazy how these communists love to say that. Just trust me. Take my word for it. Do you know who I am? It's insane.
as well as the sheer scale of these demonstrations, the police force proved inept in bringing order. So the Shah relied on his powerful army to defuse the situation, but with instructions to not use excessive force. Considering emotions were running high due to decades of systematic repression, this was always going to prove difficult. By the beginning of summer 1978, it seemed as if the Shah's repeated concessions to the protesters were working. He had removed Savak and government officials that the people particularly opposed. Demonstrations grew fewer and fewer. But by August, economic shortcomings, coupled with the fact that it was Ramadan, strengthened the hands of the ulama to call for renewed protests against the government. This succeeded as Iran's major cities were brought to standstills by massive strikes and demonstrations. The Shah, encouraged by his previous appeasement's supposed success, continued to conciliate the opposition. In reality, he misunderstood the dynamics. He had made foes of too many people for too long to cool the fury that motivated their anti-establishment sentiment. In essence, it was too little too late. So even when the government abolished the one-party state, even when it restored the Islamic calendar, even when it allowed freedom of expression, even when it began to prosecute corrupt government officials, all it did was further encourage the opposition.
That is powerfully important. They kept on giving in to these extremists. They didn't want their cities burning. They didn't want the chaos. They wanted to find peace. Live and let live. Just because you want to do something doesn't mean it has to affect me. I'm not going to be a bigot. Do what you want. Well, it was never enough. Every time that they gave, the extremists just wanted to take a little bit more, over and over and over again. History repeats itself. You need to understand this. This is so important to why people are having this outrage against Islam. This has already happened. In my parents' lifetime, this has already happened. To a nation that was actually modern. It's incredible.
The ulama, especially Ayatollah Khomeini, emerged as the leaders of this anti-Shah movement. Iran's domestic stability continued eroding. In August, the Cinema Rex movie theatre was burned down by arsonists in the oil-important city of Abadan, killing more than 400 people. The government was forced to state that it was not involved in the face of accusations from Khomeini and others that it was responsible for it. These pleas of innocence fell on deaf ears as revolutionary fervour had reached fever pitch, even though some analysts believed the arsonists were in fact Islamists. A few days after Eid al-Fitr, in September 1978, Black Friday took place, where the military shot and killed up to 100 protesters after ignoring the Shah's imposition of martial law. For many in the country, conciliation with the Shah's regime was no longer an option. The next month, a nationwide general strike was called which brought a halt to the economy. Recognizing the weakness of his position, the Shah took no action against this. In the meantime, he had pressured Saddam Hussein to expel Khomeini from Najaf, a key Shia city that held deep-rooted ties to the Shias of Iran. So in November, Khomeini moved to a village near Paris, France. From there, he was able to generate greater exposure for the Iranian protest movement through the Western media.
Think about that. The Ayatollah himself, before he was able to really assume power, he ran out of where he was hiding and went to Paris, a Western country where he was able to gain more power. And you guys think that these Islamists coming here, they have no intention on doing the same thing? This is their mission. This is their creed. This is what they are here for. This is their duty as Islamists. I need you guys to understand this. We're not racist. We're not hateful. We're not bigots. The reason that clip that I shared of the Irish woman chanting that this is a Christian country and Christ is king in Ireland, the reason that's going so viral is people are concerned. You guys need to understand this is not just a one-time thing. This is not new. This has literally happened.
The move clearly backfired on the Shah, who wanted to disconnect Khomeini from his support base. Instead, the intense coverage he received made Khomeini the most influential Ayatollah. To the Western media, he was an apolitical spiritual figurehead. This is because Khomeini strategically focused on issues such as social injustice and corruption, whilst hiding any mention of his intentions to create a theocratic state. He had written a book in 1970, Vilayat-i Faqih, meaning guardianship of the jurist, which argued Islamic jurists should be responsible as political guardians in order to ensure the country was being run according to the Sharia.
Which means that it's a book on how to be a spy and snitch on your neighbors. Which, they really tried to encourage during COVID, so you know that they're not above doing that here as well. All of this should be a huge red flag when you start to see places like Dearborn, Michigan pop up and you see these giant groups of people in the street with their flags, waving their arms. There's a reason that it should shake you to the core.
His omission of this served to dupe not only the West, but Iranians themselves, seeing as the coalition against the Shah was very broad. So he focused on a socio-economic critique of the Shah rather than the proposed solution of rule by Islamic jurists. Meanwhile in Iran, protests started to turn into riots as the army and police felt powerless due to the indecision of their leaders. The Shah had created a centralized system that was dependent on him, so if he floundered, so too did the whole system. In 1974, he had been diagnosed with cancer, from which he would eventually die in 1980. His French doctors had prescribed him anti-cancer drugs which are known to impair mental faculties by causing depression and anxiety. Regardless of the reason, the Shah was being indecisive and it played right into the hands of the opposition. Eventually, he formed a military government which started to take more assertive action. In December, during the Islamic month of Muharram, huge protests were organized by Islamists to commemorate Ashura, the day the third Imam, Hussein ibn Ali, was martyred. Estimates for involvements in these protests go as high as 9 million people, more than the French and Russian revolutions. The demonstrations were symbolically led by Ayatollah Taleghani and the secular Democrat National Front leader Karim Sanjabi. Whilst Islamists were essential to the planning of the revolution, by this point liberal and leftist groups were intimately involved in the opposition. In fact, the main leftist group, the Tudeh Party, had a prominent history of being anti-establishment. Their rise worried America, which has led some people to accuse the US for aiding Khomeini once the writing was on the wall regarding the Pahlavi regime's downfall.
Let's hang on that for just a second. It was brought by leftists in the country. It was brought by leftists in the country. Please understand what you guys are trying to do to us. This is so real.
The Shah would leave the country, never to return, on January 16, 1979. Iran became the scene of intense celebrations as signs of the monarchy were torn down by the crowds. Before he left, he had appointed Shapur Bakhtiar as Prime Minister. Bakhtiar rejected the dominance of the ulama in politics, and he was promptly expelled from the National Front for accepting the position. On February 1st, Khomeini returned to Iran after 14 years and was welcomed by hundreds of thousands of enthusiastic supporters. Never one to mince his words, the Ayatollah made it clear he rejected Bakhtiar's government. On February 5th, he declared a provisional revolutionary government with the moderate Muslim and nationalist Mehdi Bazargan as the prime minister. The fact that he was even able to do this showed who was really in charge. After a period of tension between the two rival governments, which involved small armed battles, pro-Khomeini forces won as the army declared its neutrality. On February 11th, Bakhtiar escaped Iran, only to be assassinated 12 years later by agents of the Islamic Republic in Paris.
Do you understand how quickly everything starts to just unravel when we allow leftists to use false compassion to enforce policies? Now, earlier in the documentary, just to give you guys a little bit of context, people like the Ayatollah, when they're in this position religiously, they have a lot of influence over the political goings in their community. I believe it even said that he has the ability to just make law, or at least strongly influence law. And he was taught by somebody who did this but remained silent for the majority of their career because they felt like it was wrong to actually overstep. It was important to have as an option, but it wasn't really exercised. But once he was able to take over that position, clearly he had different ideas in his head about the proper way to handle that position.
And with this, the revolution had succeeded. The protests which had begun 13 months prior had brought down a monarchy. But as is often the case with revolutions, the aftermath revolves around a consolidation of authority by removing potential threats. What ensued was essentially a power grab by Khomeini and his Islamic fundamentalist loyalists. Throughout 1979, Khomeini set up a number of revolutionary bodies that quickly overshadowed the authority of Prime Minister Bazargan. Despite having massive popular support, Khomeini's movement did not have an official militant wing. so in May, he established the Revolutionary Guard to safeguard the Islamic Revolution. After the Shah was admitted to the US for cancer treatment, the Islamists demanded that he be extradited to Iran to stand trial for his crimes. The demand was rejected, thereby leading to the Iran hostage crisis on November 4th, when student followers of Ayatollah Khomeini took over the US embassy in Tehran and held 52 Americans hostage.
Wow.
This led to Prime Minister Bazargan's resignation and was significant in securing Islamist control. Although it did poison the prospect of fruitful relations between Iran and America, as the latter would later cut diplomatic relations as well as impose damaging economic sanctions on the regime. In December, a constitutional referendum was held where the Islamic choice was selected by more than 99% of the voters. This was supported both by the leftist Howdeh and liberal pro-democrats, unable to see what the future held for them. Ayatollah Khomeini gained the venerable position of supreme leader, and over the next few years, he removed his erstwhile allies one by one, as he neutralized leftists, liberals, and even Islamists that did not conform to his viewpoint.
Do you understand? Is it starting to click yet? All the leftists, all the Democrats that pushed to put the Ayatollah in power were literally some of the first, if not the first people that he targeted when he wanted to consolidate his power, and he took them out. Every one of you that are fighting for these Islamists to come here and take over our country, they will take you out as soon as they get the opportunity. Please understand that. They hate you. You think that the conservatives have issues with trans people and stuff? You have never encountered a radical Islamist. They will torture you. Please understand this.
Including Ayatollah Shariat Madari, the man who had saved his life in 1964 when he secured his promotion to the rank of Marja. At the same time, widespread executions of the Pahlavi regime's civil servants also took place after brief sham trials. In January 1980, Abul Hassan Bani Sadr was elected president, a moderate who would go on to clash with Khomeini about the role of the ulama in politics before being impeached in June 1981. From 1980 until 1983, the Islamic Republic launched the Inqilabi Farhangi, or Cultural Revolution, to stamp out dissident thought amongst institutions of higher education. Universities were shut down for this period. Higher education was filled with leftists and secularists that were deemed a threat to Khomeini's vision for a theocracy. Students and teachers were purged. As a result, many Iranians fled abroad, thereby hurting the country's future prospects because of the loss of job skills and capital. Opposition groups took matters into their own hands, with the People's Mujahideen Organization of Iran, or MEK, launching a string of high-profile attacks in 1981 on Islamist government officials that included high-ranking members. But it was too late. Khomeini's stranglehold on power was complete. His spiritual authority gave him the ability to label anyone who went against him as munafiqs, or even worse, kafirs.
If you've ever seen Game of Thrones, this very much reminds me of when Cersei put that religious dude in power before they had to blow up the castle, or it was a church. It's been a long time since I've seen it, but it reminds me of that situation. It's kind of crazy how this religious man has so much influence over the sayings of the government there, and how literally was able to implement an Islamic revolution through this position of power. That is why we have the separation of church and state. That is what that actually means. We don't want the Pope to have that kind of power here. Nobody should have that kind of power over us. That's crazy.
In a strange twist, Iraq's invasion of Iran in September 1980 helped Islamist control as the nation's attention turned to defending itself against a foreign aggressor. The war would drag on for 8 long years and would do untold damage to Iran's economy and demographics, as hundreds of billions of dollars were spent and hundreds of thousands dying. But the war one of the deadliest in the 20th century, had allowed Khomeini and his Islamists to complete the consolidation of their authority. The Iranian Revolution of 1979 was remarkable to say the least. The rate at which it developed and the sheer level of participation shocked most observers at the time. People of different ideological persuasions banded together to remove a regime which was ubiquitously criticized for being corrupt and unjust. But the optimism from its revolutionary success soon turned to horror as it was hijacked by Ayatollah Khomeini's Islamists. The repression exercised by the Islamic Republic in the aftermath of 1979 was in many ways identical to the Shah's, perhaps even greater. Today, Iran is ruled by Khomeini's successor, Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, who seeks to uphold the system created by his predecessor. Since the establishment of the Islamic Republic, there have been numerous widespread protest movements against the government's policies, all of which have been put down. But Iran's modern history clearly shows that if the people are not content with their rulers, then it's only a matter of time before they rise up and manifest their will. The Islamic Republic should know this better than anyone. Thanks for tuning in. As usual, I want to give a big shout out to my Patreons for continuing to support me financially. If you're interested in helping Hikmah History financially, there's a link to my Patreon in the description to this video and in the end screen. And last but not least, I want to thank my friend Azim for his help on this script. Until next time, peace!
Alright, so just a quick little recap. Because Democrats had so much compassion that they wanted to help implement this Islamic revolution, not only did they destroy millions of lives, but they self-sacrificed themselves. It's so incredibly stupid that these leftists are still doing this, that the history is still repeating, especially because there's so much abundant information on the internet. And I mean, this video did really good. It's got hundreds of thousands of views. There's no reason that we should have to put up with this. Understand that we're not just all hateful. If you really consider yourself a hippie or somebody that just cares about the earth, what you need to do is take a step back and understand that none of us are coming at this with bad intent. Most modern conservatives, most people in the MAGA movement are former Democrats, are former people of passion, former hippies even. And we have all came to this realistic conclusion that you would think you would agree with. We don't want to have you telling us what to do, saying what we can say and saying that some of our words are offensive. We don't want you to keep polluting us with your chemicals. We're tired of war. Really just everything that is fundamentally evil. We don't like it. We don't want you to do it. We don't want you murdering babies. We don't want this weird false religious zealot group to control us anymore. But for so long you have. And this is what's going to happen. This is the writing on the wall if we continue down this path. I won't hold you up for much longer. This is what you need to know. Like, comment, subscribe. If you want to support the channel, you can follow me on all platforms, Brian D Exclusive. If you want to donate, on Cash App, it's also Brian D Exclusive, BRYAN, and then the letter D, then the word exclusive spelled as it sounds. I really can't do any of this without you. It's been a huge blessing to see my followers go up so much on Facebook over the last few weeks. I really am committed to at least trying my best to tell the truth. And in the words of Jordan Peterson, I can't always guarantee to tell the truth, but I will do my best not to lie. If you have any thoughts on this, comment them below. If you have any additional information that you think I should be aware of, definitely let me know. If you have any stories that you think that I should be covering or news events, email me at bigb517@gmail.com. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.